in January this year, published new ISO 11, ISO EN ISO 7704. And this ISO is about the requirements for the performance testing of membrane filters used in combination with culture media. What can you expect from this webinar? So after this webinar, you will have an overview about the main content of this new EN ISO 7704. So let me first introduce myself. My name is Andreas Bubert. I work for our company since 24 years with positions in R&D, marketing and product management with a focus on food and beverage microbiology topics. I'm the moderator today. We have 3 speakers today. I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Barbara Gerten as the first and main speaker. Barbara works for our company since 2008 as Senior Scientist Traditional Microbiology. Barbara is a German delegate of ISO. She's also member of the ISO working groups Culture Media and Quality Control of Membrane Filters. Most important for the topic today is that she was the responsible project leader for the new EN ISO 7704. Barbara will give you an introduction into this new ISO standard. The second speaker is myself, and I already introduced myself. In my function as Senior Global Product Manager for Culture Media, I will present you in brief about the selectivity improvement for our very widely used chromogenic coliform agar, which is described in ISO 9308 Part 1 for E. coli coliform enumeration by membrane filtration. I'm also very pleased to introduce my other colleague, Sam Santiago, as the third speaker. Sam works as Global Product Manager for our company since 2006, focusing on food safety in the food and beverage industries. Sam will show you which information about these topics we have and will have available for our customers. So regarding the timeline, as usual, we will start with 5 very general poll questions. Your answers to these questions give us a better understanding about our audience today, and it will take about 2 minutes only. We then continue with Barbara's presentation, which will take about 30 minutes. My presentation follows then, which takes about 10 minutes. This is followed by Sam's presentation, which takes about 5 minutes. And we will then continue with a question and answer session where Barbara, Sam and I will answer as many questions as the time permits before the end of our webinar session. At the end of the Q&A session, we will ask our participants to answer an exit survey to help us to improve our future webinars. So before we start, let's get familiar with the functionalities available on this webinar platform. You will see on the right-hand side of the webinar window a question box. Feel free to use that box at any time throughout the webinar when you wish to send us a question. The poll and survey question will also be visible in a checkbox. Important is also the availability of certificates. You can receive a certificate for this webinar already today. So after 30 minutes, there will be a link available to download this certificate in the certificate of attendance window, also on the right side. If you want to receive this document, stay in the webinar and click on the button. So we will start now with the first 5 poll questions. So the first question is, what is your industry? Food, beverage, water, consultancy, pharma, biotech, hospital, or other? Please tick your answer. So from the results, we see the water industry has the highest attendance here. This is not unexpected because the water industry needs to do a lot of membrane filtration, followed by the food processing, process water testing, and also pharma is doing a lot of membrane filtration. So I'm also very impressed that we have such an attendance also from the pharma side. Thank you. Next question. In which kind of laboratory do you work? Is it a company lab, a contract lab, a university lab, a governmental lab, a surveillance lab, or another lab, other, or no laboratory? Please tick your answer. We wait a few seconds, and then we all see the results. So indeed, the majority comes from the company lab, followed by governmental labs. And it's clear that they all do membrane filtration. Thank you very much for your answer. The next question is, please select your job area. Are you from production, quality assurance, quality control, regulatory or compliance, or research and development, R&D, or other? Please tick your answer. We wait a few seconds until we have the results. So the majority comes from quality control, and there's a lot of membrane filtration done. But also interestingly, R&D is also represented in quality assurance as well. Next question. Is your laboratory ISO IEC 17 or 25 accredited? Yes or no? Please tick your answer. We wait a few seconds. Wow. All participants who who gave answers, 100% accreditation. Wow, very impressive. Thank you very much for your answer. Is your laboratory following EN ISO 11133 for quality control and preparation of culture media? Yes or no? Please tick your answer. And here again, so here we see 100% ticked for yes, we are following ISO 11133, which is indeed a very important standard. Yeah, thank you very much for your answers. So now it's time to hand over to Barbara to begin with the presentation. Barbara, could you please start your presentation?
Thank you very much, Andreas. Welcome and good day also from my side. Welcome to the presentation on the new EN ISO 7704, just published in January of this year, 2023. The water quality requirements for the performance testing of membrane filters used for direct enumeration of microorganisms by culture methods. This second edition cancels and replaces the ISO 7704, which was published in its first edition by 1985, so long time ago. The new EN ISO 7704 was prepared by a technical committee from the water sector, water quality, from the microbiological methods, in close collaboration with the European Committee for Standardization for Water Analysis. With the active contribution, it was done, of course, of experts from more than 15 countries from really different areas of the world, not only European countries, Asian countries, and also from the US. It was worked out in Working Group 22, Quality Control by Membrane Filters, of two project leaders, Mrs. Dr. Katrin Luden from Germany and myself, also from Germany. This new EN ISO standard can be used worldwide because it is an ISO international standard and it is implemented in all European countries for the near future, because it is a European EN and ISO standard. In all European countries, it is mandatory to implement these EN ISO standards. Currently, it is available in English language from the ISO web store, iso.org, and in other languages very soon from the respective national standardization bodies. We expect it at least in French and German language, but maybe also in Spanish and other languages. The new EN ISO 7704/2023 specifies the requirements for the performance testing of membrane filters. It is applicable to membrane filters which are used for the retention, followed by direct enumeration of specific microorganisms on solid media, but also from other devices containing media like absorbent pads. But also, always the solid surface is needed. It is not applicable for membrane filters used for concentration and elution or for qualitative methods. It applies to manufacturers producing membrane filters, but also, of course, to the microbiological laboratories using the membrane filters for their own testing or providing these testing results to other end users or membrane filters to other end users. Membrane filters are used for the retention, followed by direct enumeration of microorganisms, are used in many methods for water analysis. That is why the new EN ISO 7704 applies to the analysis of different water samples, including the drinking water, bottled water, and other water samples with expected low numbers of microorganisms, but also to water samples with expected high numbers of microorganisms, for example, surface water or processed water. EN ISO 7704 is referenced in other standards and methods using membrane filters, such as EN ISO standards in the water quality microbiological methods itself. But it is now also cited in methods of the International Food and Vegetable Juice Association methods, the so-called IFU methods, where also membrane filtration is used and the membrane filters needs to be tested before, according ISO 7704, before they are used. So ISO 7704 is an indispensable standard for the application of specific other standards, like the very often used EN ISO 9308 Part 1, water quality enumeration of Escherichia coli and coliform bacteria, the Part 1 for the membrane filtration method for waters with low bacterial background flora. But also, as mentioned, in the new IFU method number 2, just published last year, the method on the detection and enumeration of acid-tolerant spoilage microorganisms of fruits and related products. Because all these standardization organizations, expert producing, writing these new standards, have acknowledged that membrane filters which meet the required performance criteria are a prerequisite for any reliable microbiological work. Therefore, sufficient performance testing should be carried out to demonstrate that a batch is fit for the purpose and that the filter can produce consistent results for the specific analysis. The quality of the membrane filters shall be tested together with the intended specific culture medium to demonstrate their suitability for use in a so-called microbiological function test. And that is really new in this second edition of EN ISO 7704. In the first edition from 1985, this was not required. This microbiological function test implies that batch testing should demonstrate the suitability of the whole system, the membrane filter in combination with a specific culture medium, including the filtration step. So the new EN ISO 7704 describes the required batch testing of membrane filters always in combination with a specific selective culture medium. And additionally, it describes optional supplementary quantitative and qualitative testing. It is very important to have in mind that results obtained from one species or one group of microorganisms may not be valid for other groups. For this testing of the membrane filters together with a specific culture media. The key element of the new EN ISO 7704 is the so-called batch testing. This is required when a different batch or lot of a membrane filter is tested. As explained, it needs to be performed for all combinations and of course then for each batch of membrane filters with each batch of culture medium that is used for the quantitative analysis with the procedure of the enumeration methods required. It shall be done, if possible, before usage of the combination of membrane filter culture medium by the manufacturer or by the user. And of course, it needs to be adjusted to the procedure of the applicable standard using this combination membrane filter and culture media in terms of the specific culture medium, the incubation temperature and time, as well as the suitable test or control microorganisms. It is the responsibility of the end user to ensure that all required combinations of test strains, microbiological culture media, and membrane filters have to be tested before use. And it is not required to evaluate the performance of the membrane filter separately to the performance of the culture medium. You can combine this test. What are the main steps in the new EN ISO 7704? First, we start with the inoculum, the preparation of the suspension or inoculum by using a working culture or by using certified reference material, CRM. So the new EN ISO 7704 is explaining also how to use certified reference material, and this aspect is also new in this second edition. Then the second step is the testing itself. The required batch testing is containing two modules of testing. One module is the module 1, the reference count for productivity on a selective culture medium. We need to know the reference count of the control strains we are using. And of course then the module 2, the testing of the productivity, the selectivity and specificity itself by using the membrane filters with the specific selective culture medium. After this preparation, it is followed by incubation, and there the incubation needs to be done as given by the method of the relevant specific standard, like the coliform standard. After the incubation, of course, we are counting and the determination of results is followed. We determine the productivity ratio, PR, which needs to reach a defined minimum limit. And we have to assess the selectivity and specificity testing. So it's very good that all these steps for the counting determination of results, including the testing itself, is following the ISO 11133 for the performance of culture media. So it's absolutely the same methodology. So after doing all these steps, and if all requirements are fulfilled, then we come to the batch release. That means the batch of the membrane filter in the combination with the use of the batch of specific culture medium. So let's start with the preparation of microorganisms for the performance testing. You need to know and to have in mind that appropriate microorganisms for the performance testing are stated in the corresponding standards, like the EN ISO 9308 Part 1, the standard for the coliforms. So here these kind of tables. Here the performance testing of the chromogenic coliform agar is given to be used in the methodology of this standard. For the chromogenic coliform agar, we have to test, as you see on the left side of the table, the productivity, the selectivity, and the specificity. So, what to be used as a minimum for the end user? For the quantitative productivity, we need to use one control strain of E. coli. There are 2 strains given as an option, but we need only one of the 2 strains and 1 strain of the coliforms. There are 2 coliforms given. You see it in the column of control strains. We have 2 E. coli strains, 1 strain to be used, and we have 2 coliforms. One is the Enterobacter aerogenes you can use, or the Citrobacter freundei you can use. So you have to choose only one of the coliforms. For the selectivity, it is a qualitative testing. You need only one of the control strains of Enterococcus faecalis and one of the control strains of for the specificity for the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Please consider that the performance tests on productivity, selectivity, and specificity are necessary for every combination of batches of chromogenic coliform agar, so-called CCA, and membranes, which are intended to be used together. Coming now to the step of preparation of the inoculum. For the inoculum, we need for each control strain a test suspension with a known quantity of CFU coliforming units, which has to be prepared. This is best achieved by following a strictly standardized protocol. So the inoculum can also be prepared by the laboratory itself, but also by using a certified reference material, so-called CRM. Examples for the preparation of the inoculum, the suspension for the test, for the control strain to be tested, are given in the EN ISO 7704 and also in the general standard for the culture media EN ISO 11133. It can be done, for example, by using a fresh overnight culture and preparation from this fresh overnight culture of serial dilutions. Using then the most suitable dilution step for the inoculation. So you have here this kind of example of a figure which is from another sample, from another standard. Here you are preparing the overnight culture. Then you prepare different dilutions, and every dilution is plated out. From the plating out and incubation, you see next day the colony forming units you achieve in the volume you plated out. And from that, you can calculate what is the inoculum, the suspension count, the reference count you have in your dedicated dilution. Because for the quantitative productivity testing, we need a reference count which is a quantified inoculum of the specified microorganisms. It is required to count a level of approximately 100 CFU colony-forming units. But the standard is not so strict. A practicable range to be used will be 80 CFU to 120 CFU to be counted. You can also count more colonies. The precision is then increased. Normally, 80 CFU can be regarded as a guidance for the general upper limit for the counting on one membrane filter with the normal diameter of 47 to 50 millimeters. what is used in the water analysis. Of course, for that, more than one membrane filter can be required to reach a total of approximately 100 colony-forming units for counting. 2 membrane filters are normally enough, with approximately 50 target colonies, 50 CFU on each. For the qualitative testing, we need a higher inoculum, and this needs not to be counted. For the selectivity, we inoculate with a minimum of 10 to 4 CFU, and for the specificity, with a minimum of 10 to 3 CFU per membrane filter, and for that, only 1 membrane filter each is required. Coming now to the testing itself. For the testing itself, we need the 2 models. The one is the reference count for productivity on a non-selective culture medium. It is very important to determine the reference count in a proper way. On a non-selective reference culture medium, mostly tryptic soy agar TSA is used. Using the spread plate technique, without a membrane filter, to get the real count of the reference control of the reference for the specific control stain. Then, of course, in parallel, the module 2 is done with the same control stain, with the same inoculum. The testing for productivity is another, with a higher inoculum, the testing for selectivity and specificity, always by using the membrane filters with the specific selective culture medium, using the membrane filtration technique. The specific culture medium is normally the selective medium you are using in the classical drinking water analysis for the C.A. So the inoculum is described, the different steps of inoculation are described in detail in the ISO 7704. It starts with placing the membrane filter and the positioning of the funnel, then the pipetting of at least 10 milliliter of sterile water or a sterile diluent to the funnel. To this volume, the volume of the control stain is added, and it is preferred to have the same volume as for the module 1 for counting the reference count. Then, to ensure a good dispersion of the inoculum, around 10 milliliter of additional sterile water or a diluent are added to this portion in the funnel. Then perform the filtration as in your normal lab usage and place the membrane filter on the specific culture medium, which is under test to be used with this membrane, like the C.A., for example. Plates with and without membranes are then, after the inoculation, are placed in the incubator, and the incubation itself is the same incubation as given in the specific standard. Like here, you have the incubation for the C.A. After the incubation, the main step of counting and determination of results is followed. And especially here, it is very important that the new EN ISO 7704 is exactly the same counting and determination of results and expression of results like in the culture media standard ISO 11133. So for the productivity testing, all colonies on the plates with and without membrane filters are counted separately. And then the productivity ratio is determined. Productivity ratio is the CFU on the plates with the membrane filters under test on the specific medium, like the chromogenic coliform agar with the membrane filter, divided by the number of CFU on the reference plates, like the tryptic soy agar, which was inoculated without membrane filters by direct spread plating. And this needs to be around 100 CFU to reach the required precision. For example, we have for the E. coli on the C.A. with membrane filters used 2 plates with membranes. Each gave a result of 45 CFU, so the sum is 90 CFU. The Escherichia coli on the tryptic soy agar inoculated by spread plating without membrane filters. We used also 2 plates, each with 50 CFU result, which is in sum, of course, 100 CFU. And divided and expressed as a productivity ratio, we have 0.9, which means that the test on productivity has passed. Because if you remember from the slide before, here for the productivity, we need a productivity of more than 0.7 for coliforms and E. coli each. So, of course, characteristic reactions, like here the chromogenic reaction for the formation of the colors, are also assessed. For the selectivity testing, we have not to count. We only have to assess what is the amount of the growth. Hereby, 0 corresponds to a no growth, 1 corresponds to a weak growth, which can be also only a few colonies, but also can be colonies with a very minimized colony size. And 2 would correspond to a good growth. For the C.A., for example, a total or partial inhibition of Enterococcus faecalis is required, means 0 total, no growth, or a partial inhibition with weak growth is required. For the specificity, it is essential that the biochemical responses as required are achieved. For example, for the C.A., these are the colonies of Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So as a sum, we have now reached all the required assessment results. For the productivity ratio more than 0.7, for the E. coli, for more than 0.7 for the coliforms, total or partial inhibition on the selectivity with Enterococcus, and the specificity with the colorless colonies for the Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So at the end, with these results, we can give the batch release of the membrane filter in combination with the batch of the specific culture medium. Very great result. But what to do when a new type or a new filter is tested, and especially what to do if a problem in the day-to-day use or batch testing is noticed. You are not reaching these results. Or you have seen that there are discrepancies in colony appearance between different membrane filter brands, types or lots are observed. For this, and this is also new in this edition, second edition, was not contained in the first edition of the ISO 7704. We have introduced a supplementary quantitative testing of membrane filters for information. Here, for this supplementary optional testing, we are testing again the module 1, the reference count, determine the reference count by spread plating. The module 2, the productivity, selectivity, and specificity by using the membrane filters with the specific selective culture medium, as both as a repeat. Then we have the possibility to test a new module 3, detection of the inhibition of the target microorganisms due to the membrane filter itself. Therefore, we place the inoculated membrane filter on a non-selective culture medium, the same we are using for the reference count, the TSA tryptic soy agar. With this non-selective culture medium, we can see if the membrane filter itself may have an inhibition effect on the target microorganism if we are not reaching the required productivity. But it could be also that the selective culture medium itself inhibits the target microorganisms. So for that, we have the module 4, which tests the detection of the inhibition of target microorganisms due to the selective culture medium itself without the membrane filter. Here, you are only spreading the microorganisms direct on the surface of this selective culture medium. And then this new standard has a very big informative annex, which gives detailed examples on the interpretation of the different results. All the aspects are given in very much in detail. There's also other informative annex on the supplementary qualitative testing of membrane filters, which is also informative. This can be used when discrepancies, especially in colony appearance, are appearing between different membrane filter brands, types, or lots. It gives examples on qualitative characteristics, and it gives also the possibility to check these qualitative characteristics by using a score. It gives information on global properties like grid line growth inhibition. This means, is there an inhibition on the printed lines on the filter? But it gives also information how to assess the colony type specific properties, like the colony color. It's very important for chromogenic media. The colony irregularity, do you have a good edge of the colony itself, or do you have very flat colonies different from brand to brand of the membrane filter? Also colony size. Do you have a membrane filter which shows only very, very small colonies of E. coli, and other membrane filters which are, as from other types, very big colonies? Besides this, we have also an example of a card for recording the test results from the batch testing, which is given also for information in the standard. Very valuable if you start with the preparation of this testing. And we have also, in the new EN ISO 7704, a practical example of quantitative batch testing and the quantitative supplementary testing by the end user. This practical example is based on the EN ISO 9308 Part 1, the standard for drinking water analysis for E. coli and coliforms, where the plates of the chromogenic coliform agar have to be tested with a membrane filter that is chosen to be used later for the testing of the water samples itself. Please remind that the performance tests on productivity, selectivity, and specificity are necessary for every combination of batches of CCA and membranes that are used together. This practical example is given in the Annex and Annex E, which describes very much in detail the choice of the control strains and criteria. The preparation of a standardized test suspension and inoculum, really step by step. Then the practical batch testing and supplementary quantitative testing. The counting, the calculation, and especially the interpretation of the test results. Also, the interpretation if the test results are not according to the required result. And it is showing a complete diagram showing the mandatory and optional procedure, which is, you can see here as a small picture with all the steps. This is a practical example of the required batch testing based on the coliform membrane filter testing methods of the EN ISO standard, and the quantitative supplementary testing, which can be done if the results of the batch testing are not achieving the required results, or if you would like to have the qualifying of a new membrane or new supplier of your membranes. With all these, the new EN ISO 7704, which applies to all membrane filters used with solid culture media. You can use this new ISO standard also for other areas of the microbiology. As I said, it is developed by the standardization body of water quality, microbiological methods, but it can be used also in other areas of the microbiological testings, like in the methods for food juices, like in the methods also for other microbiological testings. Also, it can be used for pharmaceutical applications, but it is not mandatory to be used in pharmaceutical applications. It applies to manufacturers and microbiological laboratories. And altogether, it demonstrates the suitability of the entire system, the membrane filter in combination with the specific culture media to ensure a better recovery, a better testing of the filters together with the culture medium for your daily water analysis. With this, I would like to thank you very much and would like to hand over again to Andreas, my colleague.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Barbara. Before I start with my presentation, I just want to remind you that you can submit questions at any time during the presentations. So type your questions into the question tab. Okay, so now I start with my presentation. In my presentation, I'm switching over from the explanation from Barbara about ISO 7704 to the application aspects of this ISO standard. So I would like to give you some information about the formulation optimization of our Chromocult coliform agar, which you may know is widely used for drinking water testing by membrane filtration according to ISO 9308 Part 1. And this is for enumeration of E. coli and coliforms. So this ISO 9308 Part 1 was prepared based on our Chromocult coliform agar. So our Chromocult coliform agar served as a basis to develop this ISO 9308 Part 1. So therefore, our Chromocult coliform agar fulfills the below listed ISO compliance criteria. That means the typical composition as it is described in the ISO 9308, or the pH after boiling, or the performance testing using all the test strains needed for productivity, selectivity, and specificity. That is what Barbara already also showed to you. So regarding the productivity, selectivity, and specificity performance testing on the C.A. agar, it works very well for all listed test strains used for surface plating. So when you streak out, when you inoculate the Chromocult coliform agar plates with all the test strains, you will get very good results when you streak them out directly on the surface. When you do this for membrane filtration with C.A. agar, the productivity and specificity gives also clear results for the listed test strains. However, when you do the selectivity on the C.A. agar using Enterococcus faecalis used for membrane filtration with membrane filters, here we have to say this is very partially inhibited. So in the ISO standard, there's partial inhibition indicated, and when you do this together with the membrane filter, you see very partial inhibition. So that means you see only very slight reduced number of colonies on the membrane filters when you compare the number with the colony number on the reference medium tryptic soy agar. And also there's only slight reduction of the colony size on membrane filters when you compare the colony size on the tryptic soy agar. Both are criteria for partial inhibition. So reduced number of colonies and reduction of colony size. So, but as this is not so much apparent, we call it very partial inhibition. Because of that, we received in the past several customer inquiries who asked us if we could make our chromocold coliform agar more selective. So this slide shows you again the requirement, as Barbara already pointed out, for ISO 7704. The performance tests on productivity, selectivity, and specificity must be done now for every combination of batches of CCA and the membranes. For the qualitative testing, that is what I highlighted here, could be better. Here you need an inoculum, a minimum inoculum of 10 to the 4 colony-forming units for Enterococcus faecalis. And if you do this test, the selectivity test, you have to test with every new batch of chromocold coliform agar and a new batch of membrane filters. You have to do this testing together. This is now the new requirement. So this slide shows you the composition of our chromocold coliform agar. On the left side of the table, you see as the composition is described in ISO 9308 Part 1. And on the right side, you see our composition. And as we served the ISO standard with our chromocold coliform agar composition, so the composition is identical. So when we wanted to improve the selectivity, we looked at the composition, and it's clear that we have a composition of 13 different CCA ingredients. So chromocold coliform agar is a very complex culture medium. So each ingredient is available in different qualities. So that means if we wanted to improve the selectivity, it has been a huge empirical work to develop an optimal combination of the ingredient qualities in order to meet the full ISO QC compliance and to stay compliant with the composition. So we did this optimize the formulation improvement. The typical composition was optimized by using different qualities of the same ingredients. So we could indeed find an optimized composition that remains compliant to ISO 9308 Part 1. So that there was no ingredient replaced by any other ingredient with another CAS number. So all these ingredients remained the same. Of course, our own QC lab did evaluations using test strains grown on membrane filters on chromocold coliform agar. They tested several E. coli and coliform strains, and they found no change in the productivity. They also found no change in specificity using test strains like Pseudomonas aeruginosa. But they found, and this was the good side, they could significantly improve the selectivity using various Enterococcus faecalis test strains. You can see this on the picture below. On the left side, the picture on the left side is the previous formulation, the old formulation, when this chromocold coliform agar was placed with a filter where Enterococcus faecalis, this test strain here indicated, was membrane filtered, and the filter was placed on the CCA agar. You see here more than 100 colonies. With the new formulation, with the optimized formulation on the right side, you see there was no growth anymore. So that means we could achieve here with this combination 0 colonies, meaning total inhibition. Of course, we also gave this new optimized formulation to an external evaluation at the IWW. This is a water testing lab in Western Germany, and they confirmed our internal results. So what we are also doing is currently we have an external study in progress with the intention to publish these data. So in conclusion, we could improve the typical composition of our chromocold coliform agar, which leads indeed to better selectivity in the performance test in combination with membrane filters. Now it's easier for the customers to see the selectivity results. The new batch of our chromocold coliform agar with the improved quality is already produced, QC released and available. We will shortly also adapt our batch certificate, our QC certificate, for the parameter Enterococcus faecalis grown on membranes. In the old specification, we indicated partial inhibition. The new specification will have for Enterococcus faecalis total or partial inhibition. So by the way, our quality control lab in Darmstadt in Germany releases the CCA agar under accreditation. So our QC lab is accredited as registered test lab according DIN EN ISO 17025 for the performance testing of culture media for microbiology according to ISO 11133. You see the certificate, the accreditation certificate on the right side. Yeah, so that's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. And now it's time to hand over to Sam. Sam, could you please start your presentation?
Thank you very much, Andreas. Thank you very much, Barbara. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share to you how we would like to support everybody here on the daunting task of getting compliance for the ISO 7704. So, as a company, we would like to give you 3 options, to have this as support. So we will provide you a regulatory flyer. So this is a brief summary of what Barbara has presented today, an FAQ white paper. So we urge you to please raise your questions because we will use all of the questions and give it to you later on. And we are also performing a membrane application note for the performance of our membranes. In terms of timeline, as you can see, the first support that we would like to provide you is this webinar. So for everybody who would like to get an update or a copy of the presentation after the webinar, we will be sending you an email with the link on demand for you to see and view the presentation once again and probably share it to your colleagues. On top of that, we do have a regulatory flyer. Like I said, this is a brief summary that will be attached on the email that you will receive later. So you can download it and share this to your colleagues and partners in the business. So what we're doing right now as well is an FAQ white paper. So we have questions collected from this webinar from all of other customers that we have, and we will try to answer them. So we will try to collect them until May and then release one in June. So all the registrants and participants for today will also receive an email from us in June of all the asked questions and the answer coming from Barbara. And after that, we will continue this process until December of this year. And if we do collect a sizable amount of questions, we will have another version of this FAQ and we will send it in January of 2024. In some of our customers using our membrane, so we have performed a study with an external lab on the performance of our membranes from all the applications, and this will be also available in June for your download. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your local Merck representative or our technical sales service teams, which we will be showing to you the link and email below. Okay? Thank you very much, and I think it's time for our Q&A.
Yes, thank you very much, Sam, for your presentation. Now, as all presentations are given, we will now continue with the Q&A session, and we will address the questions submitted by our participants. Let's start with the first question. I see there are already a couple of questions. Let's start now with the first question. This is a question that always comes: can we receive a copy of this presentation? So I can answer this question. And we are not sending out this presentation